Welcome to the part 4 of our series on carbohydrate physiology and metabolic pathways. We now explore how glucose is transformed into ATP, the cell's primary energy currency. So, from sunlight to cellular power, glucose to ATP, the question is how is sunlight transformed into the energy that powers our muscle movement? So, let's trace the biochemical relay from the ancient cyanobacteria to mitochondria. So around 2.5 to 3.5 billion years ago, sunlight sparked a biological revolution. A tiny cyanobacteria, aka blue-green algae, thriving in an ancient shallow oceans, began releasing oxygen. Over time, they reshaped Earth's atmosphere, building up the 21% oxygen we breathe today and enabling the rise of a complex life. But how does this ancient oxygen story translate into the energy that powers our muscles today? In a broad terms, sunlight drives photosynthesis in both ancient cyanobacteria and today's plant leaves, creating glucose and oxygen. That glucose is absorbed by muscle cells where mitochondria convert it into ATP through cellular respiration. This ATP powers movement, connecting solar energy to physical activity across evolutionary time. Okay, this is a photosynthesis overview that plants absorb water through their roots and carbon dioxide through stomata in their leaves. In chloroplasts, they use sunlight to perform photosynthesis, producing glucose and oxygen. These glucose fuel plant growth and support the food chain. While cellular respiration in human as well as in animal use glucose and oxygen originally produced by plants to generate ATP inside their mitochondria, releasing carbon dioxide and water as byproduct. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration from a continuous energy cycle that sustain life. In photosynthesis, on your left, plants use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to produce glucose and oxygen. Then on your right, through cellular respiration, both animals and humans break down that glucose and oxygen in the mitochondria to release ATP, carbon dioxide, as well as water. Now, this cycle keeps energy flowing, an ecosystem balance. At a cellular level, plants harness sunlight in their chloroplasts to produce glucose and oxygen. Animals then rely on mitochondria to transform these molecules into ATP, fueling movement and acidity. These cycles connect solar energy to biological motion. Again, I'd like to highlight on this slide that the flow of energy between photosynthesis and cellular respiration plays a crucial role in sustaining Earth ecological harmony. So let's return to glycolysis pathway, where glucose is broken down to cytosol to form pyruvate, producing ATP as a source of cellular energy. During anaerobic glycolysis, the breakdown of one molecule of glucose into two molecules of pyruvate yield a net gain of 2 ATPs. This broken down into starting from glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, abbreviated as G3P. Each molecule goes through a series of reactions that produce 2 ATP per G3P. Since one glucose yields 2 glyceryl 3-phosphate or G3P molecules, the total ATP produced is 4 ATP. So minus the 2 ATP, that are consumed during the energy investment phase. So under this same anaerobic condition, the two NADH produced during glycolysis are used to generate NAD plus, not to make ATP by converting pyruvate into lactate. Now this process also produces two NADH, but under anaerobic condition, NADH is typically used to generate NAD, for example, by converting pyruvate into lactate, not for ATP production. And so again, the net ATP is 2 ATP under anaerobic glycolysis. Now, let's go to the Krebs cycle. The pyruvate in the cytoplasm enters into the mitochondria and is converted into acetyl-CoA, which begins the Krebs cycle or the tricarboxylic acid cycle. So as acetyl-CoA moves through the cycle, it generates 3 NADH, 1 FADH, and 1 ATP per turn. These electron carriers then head to the electron transport chain where they help produce ATP through oxidative phosphorylation. In other words, glucose covalent bonds store high energy electrons. As these bonds are broken during metabolism, the electrons are transferred to carrier like NAD plus and FAD, which deliver them to the electron transport chain. There, their energy drives ATP production, powering cellular function. Now, let's go to mitochondria. The mitochondrion has a double membrane, an outer membrane that's smooth and permeable, and an inner membrane that's folded into cristae. This fold create two key component or compartments: the intermediate space, where protons accumulate during the electron transport chain, and the matrix, where the Krebs cycle occurs and NADH and FADH are produced. These structures is essential for efficient ATP generation. Now, the NADH and FADH generated from Krebs cycle carry high energy electrons to the electron transport chain in the inner mitochondrial membrane. As electron moves through the chain from chamber 1 to 4, from left to right on your slides, energy is used to pump proton into the intermembrane space, creating a proton gradient. This proton gradient powers ATP synthase, which allows proton to flow back into the matrix, driving the production of ATP. It's an analogy that the ATP synthase like a tiny turbine in the mitochondria using the flow of hydrogen ion similar to water through a dam to spin and generate ATP from ADP and phosphate. So this breakdown shows how glucose metabolism from glycolysis to the Krebs cycles to the electron transport chain produces approximately 32 ATP depending on the cellular efficiency and transport mechanism. That ATP powers vital function like muscle movement and nerve activity, making glucose metabolism central to the cellular energy supply. So, in summary, in this presentation, we trace the origin of life back to the ancient cyanobacteria whose photosynthetic activity began Earth's oxygenation. We explored how modern plants continues this legacy, converting sunlight into glucose and oxygen through photosynthesis. The energy then fuels life through cellular respiration, where glucose is broken down in the mitochondria by glycolysis, the Krebs cycles, the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Together, these processes form a continuous energy cycle that powers ecosystem and movement from sunlight to cellular fuel. So that concludes part 4 of our presentation. Maybe stay tuned as we move forward to part 5, fat metabolism, the biochemical journey of lipid transforming into cellular energy.